briefly, I read your blog post unrelated to today's topic, but would you share with the group, it's really fascinating, of what you saw transpire yesterday before the Judiciary?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, by way of background, and this gets a little bit nerdy, but I'll do my best to explain it. We had a judge right here in Mobile. Is it Grenade? How do you say it? Is it Grenade? Is that what you said? Okay, Judge Grenade. She issued an opinion ordering all the probate judges in Alabama to provide marriage licenses to same-sex couples. So there's a federal order saying all probate judges in Alabama are required to give these marriage licenses to same-sex couples. At the same time, there was an order from the Alabama Supreme Court saying this law is still in effect. So it creates this conflict. Federal court says, give them the license. Alabama Supreme Court says, don't give them the licenses. What is supposed to be done when you have this sort of conflict? Now, the easy and wrong answer that most people say is, well, of course the federal court prevails. That's nonsense. A federal district court is no more qualified to interpret the Constitution than the state Supreme Court. They are equal bodies. They simply are. That much is not controversial, right? The federal court doesn't trump. What happened in this case is that Judge Moore issued what's called an administrative order. Thank you, an administrative order, which effectively said, hey, Alabama judges, our court, the Alabama Supreme Court, still has this order in effect. Right? This wasn't a case of like a George Wallace or Bull Connor saying we need to ignore federal courts. Moore's order recognized the fact that we still have this conflict that exists. He probably could have phrased it better, but he's smarter than most of the people reading it were. But if you actually read meaning, he said we have this conflict that exists. People in the media said, well, wait a minute, he's urging people to ignore federal courts. That was not the import of his decision. Now, if a probate judge in Alabama ignored Judge Grenade, at that point, they could be held in contempt of court. But that's separate from a question of what is the Alabama law in effect.
All the probate judges went before Grenade, just the Mobile court. All the probate judges were not parties to that action.
Well, Judge Grenade certified a class action where she bound all probate judges as a class. So all of them were under her jurisdiction. We can debate later Rule 23 whether it's a proper certification, but that's what happened.
Did she do that on her own or at the request of one of the parties?
After she didn't do it, I think one of the parties requested it because they realized she made a mistake. Subsequent to this, though, the Southern Poverty Legal Center brought a complaint against Judge Moore in this, was it the JIC, the Judicial Inquiry Commission, and then they recommended that Judge Moore be removed, and then the Court of the Judiciary, the COJ, I don't know these acronyms, the Court of the Judiciary said that Judge Moore has to be removed. And in September, they released this 50-page opinion that I think had some significant errors in it. One of the errors was said, well, when the Supreme Court issued its decision in Bergefell, that means that all marriage laws in the United States fall. That's not how courts work. Courts only have jurisdiction to decide the issues before them. And in the case of Bergefell v. Hodges, there were 4 laws at issue. Kentucky, Tennessee, Michigan, Ohio. That was it.
Isn't that what Lincoln argued with Dred Scott?
No. I'm so glad I said it is not Lincoln, this is not Dred Scott. The Supreme Court only had jurisdiction over those 4 cases. Subsequent to a Bergefell, lower courts went to say, okay, based on a Bergefell, we're going to enjoin Louisiana's law. We're going to enjoin Texas's law. We're going to enjoin Alabama's law. And indeed, that's what Judge Grenade did. She said, based on a Bergefell, we are going to tell these probate judges not to enforce them. But this conflict still existed because the Alabama Supreme Court, because they're cowardly, refused to actually rule on the issue because they didn't want to get primaried. They don't want to get primaried. So they simply ignored it. They pretended like nothing was there. But this JIC and this Court of the Judiciary said, well, Judge Moore was ignoring the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court never said a word about Alabama's law, right? If anything, he ignored Judge Grenade, who is not the final expositor of federal law. The U.S. Supreme Court is. So when you have this conflict, anyway. So long story short, Judge Moore was removed from office, but in a very a curious way. The law says to actually remove him from office, he had 2.5 years left in his term. To remove him from office must be a unanimous vote. There were 7 members in his body. The vote was not unanimous. So instead of removing him, they simply said, well, we're going to keep you in office, but you can't draw a salary for the remainder of your term.
And they terminated all of his staff, didn't they?
And they fired all of his staff and took his name off the letterhead. So he's in this weird spot where he's technically still Chief Justice. He has no office, no staff. He can't draw a salary. He doesn't draw his pension. He can't get another job because he's still a judge. And that's his status for the next 2.5 years.
And he can't run again because he's going to be older than 70. He'll be aged out.
He's aged out, so he can't run again. So what happened yesterday was... He can't run, he's term limited as a judge.
Good point.
So what happened yesterday was surreal. So after this decision from the Court of the Judiciary, Judge Moore appealed to the Alabama Supreme Court. The Alabama Supreme Court judges recused from the case, saying we can't hear this. So who do you appeal to when all the judges recused? You pick a special court, special Supreme Court. And this was, let me show you this picture, guys. These pictures are surreal. Hold on one second. Where is it? Okay, I got it.
Did you take these? They were pretty good.
Yeah, no, I'm going to show this to your crowd. So the process is they have to draw lots. They have to draw the names from a hat or from a box. Actually, I got to show you this picture. You guys are not going to believe this. Come on, load. Come on. Oh, it's not the age. All right, I'll describe it. So the idea is you take the names of 50 retired Alabama judges, not sitting judges, 50 retired judges. You write on each slip of paper one name. You put these names in a box. The clerk of court holds the box over her head and draws out one name at a time, and it's read by the deputy clerk. I wish I was kidding you, but I'm not.
You said it was a golden cane box or something?
Yeah, it was a golden box. And, so they sit here for 20 minutes drawing names of a hat. But it's actually even worse than that. Here, I got the pictures. Because before the ceremony began, Judge Moore had filed a motion with the court objecting and seeking a continuance. But, and this was the weirdest part, there was no court to rule on it. So the Chief Justice, the acting Chief Justice, Lynn Stewart, was in the room. And Moore's lawyer, let me show you this picture. It's almost, I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. It's almost too surreal to believe. It's almost too surreal to believe. So she's sitting there holding this box over her head, looking, By the way,
she's looking very learned.
As a matter of tradition, this was the same box used the first time Moore was removed from office. They actually kept it in the archives. So this is their tradition now.
It's right across the street to the archives and brought it in.
Yeah. So before the ceremony took place, Moore objected, saying he wanted a continuance, and the Chief Justice said, "We can't rule your motion because there's no court." So then Moore and his attorney stormed out and left the room.
And that was the judge addressed. Judge Stewart.
Chief Justice.
You said she wasn't wearing any robe. Is that correct?
She was not wearing a robe. She was not sitting on the bench. So it was a very.
Were they in session technically?
No, there was no session. In fact, there was no marshal. There was no court reporter or anything else. The only I was one of the few people in the room. In fact, I put a video on my blog, joshblackman.com, and if you watch the video, here I'll play the video. The audio's not going to be loud, but you'll get the gist. Might take a minute to load. But it was a very weird. I've been doing this for a number of years. I've never seen anything this strange before. With this woman holding a box over her head.
The justices.
They picked 7 names of retired Alabama judges. Yeah.
To hear the appeal.
Yeah. So they picked a total of 50 names, right? 7 of them were drawn out of this hat primarily. But any of these 7 cannot stand, or they're disqualified. You go down the list: number 8, number 9, number 10. So a total of 50 names were drawn.
Have those names been released, or do you know?
Yeah, they're public. Here. Shh. That was me in the red tie. That's more. That's the Chief Justice in the blue. And more of a press conference outside. That's me sitting right there with the red tie. So Moore said outside that the acting chief wants to be chief, so it's all political. So everyone storms out. Okay, I'll spare you the rest. You can go watch this later. But it was, I mean, putting aside all the craziness of Judge Moore and everything that's happened, this was a very weird ceremony, and it was really surreal.
But the constitutional question, getting back to the constitutional question, when there's a conflict over an interpretation of the Constitution.
The U.S. Supreme Court is the only body that can resolve that. Not
so a U.S. district judge cannot be the ultimate arbiter on a constitutional issue that's.
She's not the ultimate, but what she can do is hold in contempt any probate judge who's ignored it.
Okay.
That is within her authority, but she can't settle the issue definitively. Judge Grenade. I've been saying Grenade now for 2 years. I guess it's Grenade. Okay.
Yeah, it's Grenade. Do you think that, based on what you've seen, and because you've written a law review article, I was actually getting ready to print it out, but do you think that what the decision to remove him was incorrect?
Look, I don't know anything about Alabama ethics, right? I have no knowledge on the Alabama canons of ethics. But what I will say is that the Court of the Judiciary made some really fundamental errors about Cooper v. Aaron, about the relationship between state and federal courts, and also about how those disputes are resolved. This Court of the Judiciary said basically when there's a conflict between a federal court and a state court, the federal court trumps, and that's wrong. That's not the law. And they made some very, very fundamental mistakes. I'll be writing more about it in the near future.
Right. Any other questions? I was going to give him a flight. We got to get you to. Thank you all, everyone.
Thank you all so much. And if anyone wants, I have a bunch of cards, and we can go buy my book too.
Well, I missed that. I'm sorry. I'll head back into service. So I'm giving you yours, Casey. Good to see you, Jason. See you, man. We're having dinner at the Hayes' house. Tell Kathy how